Hit go live. Let's get practical about artificial intelligence, looking at where the models will live, how that will impact device sales and IT service providers, and what peanut butter has to do with technology. Jay McBain from Canalys is back on the show to give us some insights. Welcome to the Business of Tech Lounge, the live version of the Business of Tech podcast. It's Wednesday, September 18th, 2024. And I'm Dave Sobel. We'll be taking questions and comments throughout the show, so make sure to put them in chat. If you have a question, we'll happily respond to it. I want to thank Sales Builder, our Patreon sponsor, whose support makes this show possible. Focus on your IT sales workflow with the power of automation and visit them at salesbuilder.com. That's BUILDR.com. And a reminder, we're watching the chat. We'll be taking questions throughout the show, so make sure to throw them into the chat and we'll get them answered. So before we dive in and bring Jay on, I want to dive in on some data that he recently shared. First, with 85% of the world's business data currently sitting on premises, the plans for training and tuning large language models will not involve forklifting this data into public clouds. The opportunity for generative AI services will grow to $158 billion by 2027, according to Canalys, a 59% CAGR. Second, with the on-device execution of these models at the edge in things like PCs, smartphones, smart devices, wearables, self-driving cars, drones, etc., partner services opportunities will outpace the device growth, 40% to 47% CAGR for smartphones and PCs over the next 4 years. And third, servers, which are already up 105.5% year over year last quarter, storage and network opportunities to train and tune these models with business data will create a solid double-digit growth in related services. In fact, they recently highlighted the parent company's Omdius research showing a 19.7% CAGR growth opportunity at the intelligent edge, pulling telco into the mix. So I'm excited to welcome back Jay McBain from Canalys, where he's the chief analyst for channels, partnerships, and ecosystems. Welcome back, Jay. It's great to have you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me.
These are great fun because you come armed with really good data. And I want to start a little bit with that 85% of data on-prem and how you think the training of AI models will happen locally rather than moving it to the cloud. Is there a sense of how partners will have to maneuver to position themselves with hybrid and edge models dominating? I think that there's something to be said about this vectorization of data where you're going to have to combine the private data with the public. What's the positioning you're thinking about for providers?
Yeah, this is one of the early questions that partners had for the hyperscalers. So if you tune back to last year, March, when generative AI became a consumer trend, it was writing poetry, music, it could write a 1,200 word blog for us. It was pretty cool. It quickly got into the business conversation. And, as we started talking, companies like Microsoft and OpenAI started talking about $4 trillion and $7 trillion target addressable markets for this. And I mean, the world economy is 105 trillion. So these are material numbers. And these numbers are, the size of the tech industry today. So people started getting a little bit tripping over themselves. So it's always partners that bring people back to kind of earth. So I got to speak at AWS, I got to speak at Microsoft, I got to speak at Google. And it was interesting as partners came back and said, you know that the world's data sits on premise. Your relationship with your bank, your relationship with your airline, your relationship in all these B2B or B2B2C spaces is on data that might sit on an IBM mainframe from decades ago, might sit on EMC storage. None of that was ever moved into public cloud. So what's going to happen? Because you're talking about a topology today, network topology to your listeners, that looks like 50% cloud, but 50% edge in terms of where the compute, storage, networking is going to reside. This looks really different than what we've been going through in the cloud, where kind of everything was with the hyperscalers. So this is kind of the interesting conversation now is where is going to be the wealth created? Where partners, where are different businesses going to draft on this trend in the next 10 years? And how's also this going to come to be? So we started writing research, not at those trillions of dollars, but in the services that partners do every day and when they're going to happen. And we tend to be overestimating what's going to happen in 2 years and underestimating what's going to happen in 10. And all this is happening again.
Have you started thinking about the order that this is going to play out in? I had Anurag Agrawal from Tech Isle on recently, who's really leaning into the idea not only of the rollout of these AI-based PCs and these edge-based enabled devices, but the idea of the small language model. But as I think about the relevance and what a partner will need to do to make a customer successful, I'm starting to ravel that there's a number of components, and I think order is going to matter. You've got to get the data organized, some level of data governance. You've got to make sure that the devices on the edge are capable. You have to make sure that the users are prepared from the perspective of both training to use it, but also that they understand the data restrictions. You've now got this element of understanding how to bring in the hybridization of it, right? We've got to make sure that we're pulling in both private and public data models, right? And I think the power is going to be combining public LLMs with private data. Have you started thinking about like the order and the opportunity levels at each stage?
Yeah, it breaks into kind of 4 major categories. And there's different kinds of partners that participate in each of these categories. I mean, the first is that every business in the world, whether you're a small business, whether you're a large enterprise, is starting to think through, what does AI mean to us? Not only what does it mean to our customer and how we bring our product to market, but the marketing, the sales, the operations, the finance, the HR, we have to have these initial conversations and maybe even get to some initial pilots on how we're going to kind of rethink like chatbots and, marketing language and things like that. So those early conversations really sit in the realm of system integrators. At the large companies who are ready to have these conversations. We're not dumping our world's, history of data into language models, and we don't trust it. We don't trust the hallucinations. We don't like the fact that this, Supreme Court in Canada came down on Air Canada, made them liable for hallucinations. Like all this is happening. We're not lined up to be an early adopter. And now that you've seen 1.5 years of results from Accenture and Deloitte and PwC and Capgemini, it's been disappointing. Those early conversations haven't turned into projects, haven't turned into, big time pilots and things like that. So it's been disappointing. The second one has been less disappointing, which is 250,000 SaaS companies today, ISVs, that can make their products better with AI. So you're seeing across the board now from, today at Dreamforce with Salesforce, talking about Einstein GPT, making it better. The Copilot, Microsoft, making it better. Every company out there has now a little AI button or feature or function that they're adding and rethinking their products. And this has been the initial kind of surge of consumption, and the uptick we've seen at the hyperscalers in terms of success on AI has really been around ISV consumption. The third stage is in data. So Snowflake and Datadog and Databricks and MongoDB and kind of this whole data layer that hasn't been all that exciting. Data warehouses and data lakes of the past is getting more exciting. So as you're thinking about training and tuning these large models, the small models, where they reside, edge to cloud, now you have to take this world of legacy data and label it properly, clean it properly, create these lakes that can actually serve these models. And there's opportunity there. And those companies are obviously growing. Those partners with skills in that area are in triple-digit growth mode at the moment. And then kind of this fourth piece, which is how does all this happen? I mentioned, servers growing 105%, which a doubling of an industry that's been around 40 years is amazing until you find out that 80 to 90% of that growth was one company, NVIDIA, who now has a $3 trillion valuation to match. So you didn't see Dell or HP or Lenovo post even double-digit growth on a triple-digit growing server market. And it just shows you kind of how this is playing out. Networking is down. Cisco and Juniper, those numbers are actually negative in the last couple of quarters. You've got the numbers around PCs, which are kind of hopping along, but they're going into a 2-year super cycle. But it isn't just AI. It's the laptops we went home, in the pandemic are now more than 3 years old. You're seeing that, Windows 10 is end of service next October, which creates a cycle. And then AI, which, you can't do AI on a $500 hunk of plastic. It's going to have to be $1,000 plus, capable machine. So those three things are creating a perfect storm, maybe 8 quarters of double-digit growth for the edge market. But again, we're watching storage, we're watching all these things. It's not there yet. So when you talk about time, we're underestimating 2 years, but over the course 3, 5, and 10 years, this is going to be a solid time for not only client server companies, but obviously cloud companies.
All right, I'm going to pull from a question from the audience here because it's really insightful. Those CAGR numbers really are quite something. And this LinkedIn viewer is asking, are there any non-obvious geos or markets that might be hidden gems that are primed to explode?
Yeah, you can watch, and one of the ways partners are being successful right now is watching AI kind of 6 different ways. Which buyers right now are lined up for the early opportunities? Hint, in many companies, the CMO right now is spending more money on technology than the CIO. So where are some of these early wins that we can go get by buyer type? Second, where can we go find, in those sub-industries, the 297 sub-industries, some industries, the ones that happen to be less, with around compliance and regulatory and governance, are moving faster than the heavily regulated ones. Makes a lot of sense. Third, looking at the different geographies. The United States is the fastest growing in the world. That's where SaaS, continues to be the majority of their business is in North America. And it's happening again with AI. Europe is kind of a fast follower. APAC is a fast follower after that. Other markets are laggards. So much like managed services, kind of started in North America, the SaaS business started in North America, we're seeing it happen again. The cloud businesses, the hyperscalers really came, North America first. It's happening again in Gen AI. And so geographically, that's the way it's going to roll. Fourth, we look at segments. Is your hairdresser, is your flower shop, is your daycare center, going all in with Copilot? No. Is the SaaS that they use to run their business, going to add a feature in the next 6 months? Yes. But it's the larger organizations that can see, generational level changes in cost, in revenue, and working with their customers are the first, so it's really top down, enterprise down in terms of where the opportunities are. Gen AI actually breaks into 250 product categories. So you can actually go in and find some growth, like, for example, cybersecurity. People are really worried about these hallucinations. They're really worried about training and tuning consumer models with your, hard-earned business data that you need to keep protected. And not only do you not want them to hallucinate, you don't want them to share that when somebody does a ChatGPT search for something. And then obviously all the models. There is subscription and consumption, there's managed, there's all kinds of different business models wrapped inside Gen AI as well. You've got to go find that specialty. And if you could find an intersection between 2 or 3 of those 6 things, you could go build a triple-digit growing business around Gen AI going into 2025.
Well, obviously, that's a big opportunity. Now, one of the areas where I've been particularly interested, and I always remind listeners, my love skews smaller organizations, is I'm trying to find ways to be effective in mid-market and in SMB with these emerging technologies. And one of the use cases that's starting to intrigue me more than anything is what I'm billing as the report builder problem. Traditionally, we've had a consistent problem with organizations being able to get access to data. It's fallen into one of 2 categories. Either the solution comes with a pile of pre-canned reports that they try and leverage, gets 80% of the way there. The software designer has done it to give access to the data. But most of the time, customers are always complaining about, well, it doesn't quite solve my problem. It doesn't quite get me the data that I want. Or the vendor spends a considerable amount of time either making APIs available, making the data all available, trying to plug Power BI into it, or they go down the rabbit hole of building a report builder that offers all of that. And we find, particularly for most, if we think about a lot of mid-market organizations that have technical chops, but are not necessarily teaching their people to build all of that. The real unlock that I'm starting to see is the best potential here is the idea of providing them natural language queries against the data that they have. What I want to get from you is, first off, I want to get your reaction to the premise, but I have a feeling you're going to think I'm onto the right direction, which leads to the second part of is what are the challenges that you think organizations need to work for that are thus the opportunity for providers in order to make that a thing?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, realize that these natural queries is going to replicate kind of the SaaS business. One of the things that kind of shock managed service providers and VARs and people that have called on the CIO for a long time is that 75% of SaaS is bought and sold to the line of business leaders. The sales leader buys CRM, the marketing leaders buys marketing automation, all the categories, which G2 Crowd has 2,262 categories of SaaS, but they're bought by business leaders. So these queries are going to happen in a department, and they're going to happen through the data probably generated inside a SaaS platform, a Salesforce, a ServiceNow, a Workday, a Marketo, a NetSuite, a HubSpot. It's going to be that data of which you can analyze, get insights from, go ask questions. And this is what AI's superpower is. It's not just building this huge big data lake, and I'm going to download the entire internet into this data lake, and hopefully, it can connect the dots for me. It's going to be to ask AI, go read the internet cover to cover about this particular customer, about this particular person, about this particular partner, and go build this wealth of information in milliseconds to give me the answer, and then bounce that against my own data and tell me the next best action. This is what AI is going to change everything for every business leader. And if a partner's there, you want to think through these use cases. And I agree with you. This is the kind of the end outcome once we train business data into large language models, is this real-time query with real-time data and real-time insights that no human would have the ability to go and click on 1,000 things to condense into one paragraph answer.
Now, you brought up the enterprise, as the traditional way that this is going to be invested in, and I buy into that from the perspective of a large market, and if we're trending and watching the entire space to say, yes, it'll get adopted in enterprise first, it'll move through the mid-market, it'll get to SMB. That is very much a market trend. But if I'm thinking about this from an individual company perspective, that means there's incredible opportunity for small companies to lean in further who may be significantly more willing to take on risk. And I wanted to get your sort of impression and take on this as a competitive thought, in that if you're a small organization, you likely have a lot less of those restrictions, both culturally and even intellectual property itself, because you've likely created a lot less of that. Let's think of the typical very small lawyer, or the very small, a small manufacturer. It could even go all the way down to a very small retail organization or a small chain of them. They're in a position where their competitive advantage is much more about customer service, intimate relationships, the classic, we have better people and they work with them better, versus we've built up this incredible lake of valuable IP. It feels to me like there's a space here on an individual or small groups of company level to be competitively aggressive with that agility. And because you aren't bringing with you all of those big risks. I want to get your take as somebody who's looking at it in broad sense. Does that happen in the market data? And if so, what are the characteristics of those organizations, or why does it not?
Right. So I think the way, there's two things that I would answer the question quickly. One of the biggest confusions with AI is it's not a product. You don't go to distribution. You don't go to a marketplace and say, I want to buy AI. What it is a feature. It's a function within everything you use today. So if you go talk to a lawyer today, running a small office or whatever else, they do not have the capability or capacity to kind of train and tune or build their own model or do those types of things. That they don't have the people, the skills, the development, the investment. Can they go buy a $30,000 chip from NVIDIA and go build no. They're going to see AI through the products they already use. The products they use that they manage their customers with. You mentioned customer success. You mentioned all these different things. They're going to ask the question, hey, can I replace or can I augment some of my junior folks with a tool that can do much better legal research and probably do better than today a paralegal? Yes. 2 versions ago of AI, ChatGPT, passed the bar exam. The second, version back actually passed the bar exam in the top 10 percentile. The most recent version that's out there today with AI is writing the bar exam. It's exponential growth. So the question is, how do I change the shape of my organization? How do I drive a better outcomes for my clients? And they're going to see all of the customer success. They're going to see all the financial. They're going to see the operational, the HR, the sales, the marketing. All of the different benefits are going to be in the platforms they already buy. It's going to show up in the things they already own. And they're going to rethink how they can do it better, not on their own, but through the tools they already use. And partners have to come around to, this is going to be how, and perhaps there's no more money on the product side. While some are offering, $5 for a Copilot or $5 for Einstein GPT today, that's going to go away in 18 months. It's just going to be built in. And then how you help that firm rethink everything they do is where the value is.
I mean, I'm 100% with you. And I think even right now, the use of those products and how you effectively use them is still wide open. And a lot of people are learning. Now, a reminder for those watching us live, we are watching the chat and we're taking those questions, drop them into the chat bar, and we will happily answer them. Jay, I want to ask you, I want to layer on another element of this. You wrote an article that's kind of stuck with me for a little bit now, and you talked about peanut butter. I don't quite have the same affection for peanut butter that I think I share with you on that one. But you use the metaphor of the selection of peanut butter to explore how AI automation and IoT is involved with everyday decision making. Those low value, repetitive tasks where it doesn't matter what brand of peanut butter you have, versus some customers who are very selective over that. And I kind of wanted to get a little bit of your insight into the thinking of the criteria that differentiate low value decisions versus high value decisions, because there's more than just the marketing of that, because we could make an argument that they're all peanut butter, but clearly for some people it really matters and for others it doesn't. I mean, what's your thinking on the criteria around low value versus high value decisions?
Yeah, this was one of those, evenings I woke up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night. And it was like personal psychology. You and I both love communities. We both love, when people get together and share in their passion. And I started thinking in my life, like, how many thousands of decisions do I make that I have no passion or no, question of which way I want to go? Just make it happen. So I kind of brought up peanut butter as the metaphor, because like you, I don't have a huge passion for peanut butter. I don't care if it's a Skippy or Jif or store-bought brand. I don't care if it's chunky or smooth. The only criteria I have is I need peanut butter because I need it in my cabinet. So of all that, it's not that passionate. If I was passionate, I'd go to farmers markets and choose ingredients and I'd be debating on Facebook, I'd be deep into the community and a passion, and I'm just not. Then I started thinking about paper for my printer. I started thinking about just the thousands of things that we do almost on a weekly basis that are just consumption models. So peanut butter for me, if you put it into my pantry and put it on a weigh scale, and every time it got down to like 2 ounces, it just got replenished. And, whoever wants to buy me the weigh scale, which, costs $5, they now have a customer for life. And if it's Skippy that does that, not only am I a customer for life, I'm recurring. So that dollar of revenue actually looks better to Wall Street for Procter & Gamble or whoever. I have no idea who owns it. But the fact of the matter is, getting recurring customers for life could be as much as just understanding how much of your market TAM doesn't care. Why do we care, as Dave Sobel would say? And so for those 1,000 decisions, and when I get paper for my printer, that's another weigh scale. And when I'm down to 100 pages, like, send me more. When I'm down to 2 ounces of peanut butter, and I could probably think of 1,000 things where I just set it and forget it. I don't want to go to Amazon and subscribe, because every 3 months I get it. It's always the wrong. I don't get enough. I get too much. It's just, you can't predict by time. There's so much more that goes into the solution. There's IoT parts of this that can have sensors and cameras. But if I can move those decisions away and just set automation in my life where the things I am passionate about, maybe my motorcycle, where I do care about how I get from point A to point B. Other people like, just give me a Toyota, Honda, whatever it is, and every 3 years refresh it. I don't care. I just need to get from point A to point B. So take the people with passion and market to them differently. They're on YouTube watching videos, racing Teslas. They're on the deep, edges of the internet, debating and fighting with people over what's better. Get the people with passion, ignite that passion. For the people that don't care, just automate and simplify their lives. And then there's about a third of the market that's just price driven. So you're going to have channels of distribution. You're going to have to show up a nickel less with a coupon at the right time. And you have to be kind of that lowest price or best value. And just treat those three markets separately and understand that it's all personal psychology. You have to, have 8 billion people kind of in this AI model of who is where and get them to declare who they are.
So, but I want to press a little bit here because I love the concept and it is a natural fit for marketing. And I want to definitely think, and I think that's also an identifying of correct buying behaviors within customers. That makes perfect sense to me. And I would, by the way, encourage our listeners both to go and read the article, which I've highlighted on the show, but also to think about that way of engagement because there's value in those that are also passionate about the decisions and there's value in the automation. But what I'm curious in your thinking about this is are there identifiable criteria about those customers? Because it feels like those that are passionate about those decisions would also be higher value in that particular space. That if I'm going after a group of people that are very passionate, motorcycle enthusiasts, for example, right? I can sell a very different kind of service to those. It leans into white glove service versus those that are just transportation, where I may be running a volume business there. Are there criteria that you've been thinking about that you can identify to say this is how we can pull those customers out to deliver that higher value work?
Yeah, the interesting thing is the first two cohorts that I just mentioned are very profitable. If you set it and forget it for the rest of my life for peanut butter, I'm going to pay MSRP. I'm never going to cash a coupon. I'm never going to grab you on a sale. And you can design your entire supply chain around people like me that need these shipments on a kind of semi-regular basis. It allows you to kind of take every cost out of your business. There's no sales, there's no marketing, there's no customer success. There's absolutely, very little supply chain costs. So you can profit off of me paying list price. But then the second, which you were kind of alluding to, I get really excited about peanut butter and I'm going really aggressive on things and things like that. I can sell Skippy Plus and Skippy Plus Plus, and now I'm paying $12, $15, $20 for a jar of peanut butter because that's my passion. And somehow I'm thinking that that's a better way to do it. What Starbucks did to a cup of coffee. So yes, a highly profitable way to upsell, cross-sell, enrich that client's life and delight them and get the value for that. The hardest is the 30% of people who just buy on price. If you don't have the right line of sight at the grocery store, if you're not listed properly on a digital marketplace, if you don't have the right coupon and you come up a nickel, too high in price, you win or lose on a weekly basis, you still want to compete for that third of the market, but just understand that's going to be your least profitable segment.
Well, good to know. And I think the other thing we've learned about this is that you're quite into more strawberry jam as your favorite on this. And I will say my sweet tooth leans distinctly to the Nutella, and I am brand loyal on that one, despite my wife's best efforts. Jay, a little bit of fun as we wrap up here. Is there a big question you're kind of pondering right now, the one that hasn't quite fully formed?
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons I listen to you every day, because it's taken governments and regulators and compliance folks and legislative folks, it always takes them 10 years to catch up. For everyone that wrote an open letter on Gen AI and, people that think we lit up Skynet here and, people that honestly think that, maybe 44% of all of our jobs could go away. This is actually the threat that might hold. This old mechanical muscles and, industrial revolution, agricultural revolution. This is the revolution that actually doesn't have humans, need not apply. Whatever state you're in, governments, it always takes them 10 years to kind of figure something out. When Microsoft invests $13 billion in a company and they turn around and consume that product back from you, doesn't, really pass the smell test. John Deere can't sell $1 billion worth of tractors and then have that person go and sell them back to them. So it's this model where regulators and governments I'm not sure they're going to get smart in time, which is going to lead to the fact that the big get bigger. These $3 trillion companies today, before governments catch up, are going to be $10 trillion companies. So if you're thinking through the eyes of your 401k or your RRSP, the deck is kind of stacked for these really big companies as utility companies, as consumption companies, who are going to kind of hide back and get all the benefits of this, regardless of the partner type. And it's not going to be as competitive of a market for that bootstrapping little startup to go and, create something big. And so I'm worried a little bit in terms of just the balance of power, or the balance of opportunity to create insane amounts of wealth through this major change in technology. And, we saw what the cloud turn did. We saw what the client server, trend did. This is that next big decade-long trend. And it seems, again, to be creating billionaires on one side and, 30% of MSPs on the other side that struggle with profitability each month.
Yeah, I have the same concern, and I am at least a little hopeful that the regulatory machine will not move as slowly. Partly because it appears, at least, when I think about this from a U.S. perspective, that there is some bipartisan support for different reasons, but at least alignment on that. And there's significantly more discussion about it than if I compare against the social media trend and I compare against the cloud trend. There's a lot more discussion, at least, happening, which is an indicator of something. And I think the other thing that is very notable here is that governments will end up being big consumers of the technology.
Yes.
I've had several upcoming interviews talking with some really interesting people on the data space, and they've alluded to how much some of the governments are consumers of that, and thus at least the organizational infrastructure of the government will have a better understanding. You and I will be having more conversations on this.
I'll leave you with one last stat.
Okay.
45% of the world's population is going into elections this year, 51 different countries, including here in the United States. We've been very clear, through this phase around the world, that we're done being the products on the internet. So what happened? A couple of weeks ago, Google lost version 2 of the cookie, trying to sell that to Europe. So that thing is going to get broken up, the buy side, the sell side of us being products, Alexa overhearing us in the kitchen, and then Facebook showing us an ad a minute later. We've kind of been clear that that's done. Now, a couple of weeks ago, Google also lost an antitrust suit in the US. So this regulation piece is picking up. Microsoft's, in front of them, Apple's in front of them. So the $1 trillion companies are hiring more lawyers than anyone. I remember I was at IBM, through that phase. And, there was more lawyers at IBM than most of our competitors had employees. And then they're going to go through a very complex here of defending how they can be multi-trillion dollar companies, when other industries and other people are struggling.
I mean, I think about, putting together the things we're going to talk about on the show. I have a recurring legislation and regulation segment that if I had been doing this show 10 years, 15 years ago, there wouldn't have been enough to talk about. Right. But now it's an actual recurring segment. That's just the general thought of there's a lot more compliance out there. But on top of that, it's exactly what you talk about is there's a pushback. There's a recognition that there's a change, and it's not all sunshine and roses. I do think, I keep quipping that there is opportunity in this complexity. And so we want to lean into that, but we need to recognize it's complex. Jay, this is super fun. I look forward to having you back again soon to mix it up some more.
All right. Thank you so much.
So we talked a little bit about data lakes, and the future of data management is here, and it's called the lake house concept. In this weekend's bonus episode, I dive into a conversation with Ori Raphael, the CEO and co-founder of Upsolver, to understand how this new data architecture is revolutionizing the way businesses handle complex data. Ori explains the key advantages of the lakehouse, including cost savings and the ability to use multiple data engines. He shares in this clip his thoughts on the evolving role of data engineers. Here's a preview.
Engineers are definitely here to stay. And for example, I can tell you that my perception of a data engineer, and I was a DBA and a data engineer, and I know that the job well. I think that the data engineer would like to be a platform manager and not a developer for R&D team. So if the R&D team needs to come to the DBA or to the data engineer and ask them to build, to write code to support the workload, then basically everything is being funneled through data engineering. So you're creating this bottleneck, and that's exactly the reason people didn't like data lake, for example. This is why we have agendas in the world like data mesh today, talking about freeing up all the people that are domain experts, not necessarily data engineers, to build their own workload.
With all the talk of data, some of us may need to come up to speed on what all of the concepts around data architectures are. I don't mind saying it was one of the things I needed to learn as well. My Patreon supporters already have this interview if you want to listen right now. It'll drop on the weekend on YouTube and the podcast feed. If you're interested, I really do encourage you to listen. Visit patreon.com/MSP Radio to sign up and get access right now. I want to thank Sales Builder, our Patreon sponsor, whose support makes this show possible. Focus on your IT sales workflow with the power of automation and visit them at salesbuilder.com. That's BUILDR.com. And vendors, you too can get your name mentioned on the live show right here. It's a simple monthly subscription. Visit patreon.com/MSP Radio to learn more. And listeners, you can support the show. Make sure to hit like, share, and then follow on all of your favorite platforms. That's the number one thing that you can do to help us out. And you can support directly on Patreon with our Give What You Want model. You set what you think the content is worth, and you'll get access to videos early. If you have a question or are listening to the recording, send it in at question@mspradio.com. Thanks for joining me for the Business of Tech Lounge, and I will see you next time.